The medical tent at Forward Operating Base Razor existed to heal, not to harm. Large white canvas panels bearing bright red crosses stretched across its frame, visible even from high above. Under international law, these symbols promised safety. Inside, the sharp scent of cleaning chemicals mixed with gritty desert air. Medical workers moved between rows of beds where injured American troops and local civilians lay waiting for care. At the intake area stood combat medic Sergeant Camila Ross, her blue medical jacket marked with blood from that morning's wounded. She was 29. Before joining the Army, she'd served 7 years as a Navy corpsman. In those years, she'd treated more injuries than most emergency doctors see in their entire careers. Right now, her skilled hands checked the condition of a 19-year-old private hit by metal fragments. Her movements showed the easy confidence that came from helping hundreds of wounded people in conditions that would destroy most healthcare workers. But nobody at Base Razor knew something crucial about Camila. Her personnel records available to base leadership didn't mention it. Before medical school, she'd spent 3 years in a secret special operations team conducting dangerous missions in hostile territory. She'd learned close-range fighting, expert shooting, and tactical operations that officially never existed. Then an explosive device nearly ended her life during a classified assignment. While recovering, she realized something important: helping people survive felt better than ending lives. She requested a move to medical services, finished all required courses, and had worked as a combat medic for the past year and a half. Her past life as an elite operator sat buried in secret files with security levels that made intelligence officers nervous. The simple official version said Camila Ross was a medic. Nothing more. That story was about to change violently. The assault began at 13:47 on a Tuesday when the hospital held maximum patients. 42 wounded, 16 medical workers, and just 8 soldiers guarding a place supposedly protected by international agreements. The first warning came when the radio operator at the command center suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence. Then the alarm system failed. Then the generator died, leaving half the hospital lit only by emergency lights. Captain Marcus Webb, the hospital's head doctor, glanced up from the surgery he was performing. Why did the power go out? Before anyone could respond, gunfire erupted. Not the occasional distant shots everyone at Base Razor had grown used to, but the continuous thunder of multiple weapons firing together. The sharp crack of AK-47s blended with the deeper boom of heavy machine guns. Camila's combat reflexes activated before her mind caught up. She dropped behind a supply cabinet, dragging the wounded private with her as bullets ripped through the hospital's fabric walls with deadly precision. Around her, medical staff and patients screamed, searching for protection that didn't exist in a building designed for healing instead of warfare. Through the chaos, Camila heard the attacking force shouting to each other in Pashto. Organized, skilled, moving with military training. This wasn't random violence. This was a planned military strike. "Get down, everyone," she yelled, her voice cutting through the panic with natural authority that made people listen instantly. Medical workers, put the patients on the floor right now. The 8 security soldiers were already returning fire, but they faced superior numbers and tactics. Camila watched 3 drop in the first 30 seconds, killed by attackers using covering fire and coordinated movement that showed serious combat training. A figure emerged at the south doorway, an insurgent in tactical equipment holding an AK-47 scanning for victims with professional efficiency. He saw a nurse helping a patient and lifted his weapon. Camila reacted instantly. Her hand found the combat knife strapped to her ankle, a remnant from her former life that regulations technically forbade, but she'd never stopped carrying. She hurled it with precision born from countless practice sessions, and the blade sank into the insurgent's throat before he could shoot. He collapsed choking, and Camila was already rushing toward him. She seized his AK-47 as he fell, verified the ammunition, 30 rounds, automatic fire, and shifted to a shooting stance that was textbook special operation. The medic's blue jacket she wore suddenly looked very different on someone holding a rifle with expert skill. 2 more insurgents entered through the same entrance, and Camila took them both down with controlled shots. 2 bullets center mass for each target, exactly as she'd been trained in her previous career. They dropped before they even understood the person shooting was supposed to be medical staff. "The medic has a gun," one of the surviving security soldiers yelled in shock. "What's happening? Be quiet and fight back," Camila shouted, already relocating to better cover. Throughout the hospital, she could hear more attackers entering from different directions. This was a planned assault. They'd likely studied the building's design, knew where patients and workers would gather, and intended to kill everyone inside. The tactical part of Camila's mind, the part she'd been suppressing for 18 months, roared back to life. She evaluated the situation with the speed that combat experience provides. Roughly 40 to 50 attackers based on the shooting volume. Multiple entry. Security force reduced to 5 working soldiers. Medical staff and patients trapped. Maybe 3 minutes before the attackers finished clearing the hospital and murdered every. Captain Webb appeared beside her, his expression showing the confusion of a doctor watching his medic transform into something unfamiliar. Ross, what are you, sir? I need you to move every mobile patient and staff member to the operating room. Camila interrupted, her tone carrying the steady authority of someone who'd made critical decisions before. Block the doors, don't open them until you hear the signal. 3 shots, pause, 2 shots. Anything else means hostiles. Sergeant, you're a medic. Sir, I'm also the only person in this hospital trained to stop what's coming. Camila said, inspecting the AK-47's chamber. Please get our people safe while I give you time to do it. Webb stared at her one more second, processing the change he was witnessing. Then decided, you heard the sergeant. Mobile patients and staff moved to the operating room immediately. We'll return for a mobile patient. As medical personnel began moving the wounded who could walk, Camila assessed her tactical situation. She had 1 AK-47 with 30 rounds, a combat knife and a hospital full of attackers expecting frightened medical workers. What she needed was better firepower, a strong position and a way to funnel the attackers into areas where she could fight them on her terms. She spotted what she needed in the corner, the security office where base guards stored their weapons during off-duty hours. Camila sprinted across the hospital's main hallway while bullets chewed the walls around her, dove through the security office door and found exactly what she'd hoped for, an HK-417 automatic rifle. The powerful 7.62mm battle rifle favored by Special Operations Forces worldwide. The weapon felt familiar in her hands. Camila performed a quick check with movements that came automatically. Chamber empty, magazine loaded, safety switch, sights adjusted. The HK-47 held a 30-round magazine filled with powerful ammunition that would penetrate body armor and walls equally well. She also discovered 4 extra magazines, 2 explosive grenades and, by incredible luck, a tactical vest with armor plates someone had forgot. Camila removed her blue medic jacket long enough to strap on the tactical vest, then pulled the jacket back over it. The appearance was strange, blue medical clothing over military armor, healer's uniform over warrior's equipment. The first room the insurgents attempted to clear was the recovery ward, 16 beds holding post-surgery patients too weak to flee. Camila heard them gathering outside the door, preparing to enter and execute everyone inside. She waited until they committed to the doorway, watched until 3 appeared framed in the entrance and opened fire. The HK-417 thundered in her grip with controlled power. The heavy rounds struck with devastating impact. The first insurgent went down before he knew he was under attack. The second managed to turn toward the threat before Camila's bullet found his chest. The third tried retreating but caught 2 rounds in the back as he scrambled from the doorway. The remaining insurgents outside the recovery ward responded with professional speed. They didn't panic they immediately maneuvered to attack from the side while laying down covering fire. These weren't amateur fighters. These were trained soldiers. Camila was already moving, using the hospital's interior design to her advantage. She'd worked in this building for 6 months and knew every hallway, every storage space, every angle and corner. The insurgents knew the design from scouting, but she knew it from living here. She positioned herself at a hallway junction where 3 corridors met, a tactical spot that gave her overlapping shooting lanes and limited the directions she could be attacked from. 2 insurgents tried charging her position, and Camila dropped them both with accurate shots that proved she'd done this type of close fighting before. Enemy behind us, someone shouted. One of the surviving security soldiers engaging insurgents trying to flank through the hospital's east section. The soldier fired a burst from his M4, then his weapon clicked empty. I'm out of ammunition. Camila pulled one of her spare magazines and threw it across the corridor to him. Reload and move back to the operating room. The soldier caught the magazine, his face showing confusion about why the medic was giving tactical commands and had extra ammunition, but he followed the order without question. Sometimes in combat, you don't question the person keeping you alive. You just obey and figure out the details later. The insurgents tried a coordinated advance, 6 of them moving in tactical formation through the central hallway using covering fire and movement exactly as they'd been trained. Camila let them push forward into the zone she'd mentally prepared, waited until they were committed, then pulled the pin on one of her grenades. She threw it with the precision from countless training hours, and the grenade landed exactly where she intended, in the middle of their formation, with nowhere for them to escape. The explosion in the narrow hallway was catastrophic. The pressure wave alone was enough to harm, and the metal fragments found every exposed target. When the smoke cleared, 6 insurgents lay down. Camila immediately switched to her rifle and fired controlled shots at any target still moving. In close combat, you don't leave wounded enemies behind you. It was a harsh calculation she'd learned in her previous life. "What's happening out there?" Captain Webb's voice came from the operating theater where he'd barricaded himself with the mobile patients and staff. "Who's shooting?" "Stay in the operating room," Camila shouted back, changing magazines as she moved to a new position. "Don't come out." She could hear the insurgent force reacting to her resistance. Their radio chatter was increasing, voices showing frustration and confusion. They'd expected to overrun a hospital full of defenseless medical workers. Instead, they were facing someone fighting back with professional skill and making them pay for every step forward. But Camila understood the numbers. She'd eliminated maybe 12 of them so far. That left 30 to 40 still active, and she was one person with limited ammunition. Unless she changed the tactical situation, eventually they'd overwhelm her through pure numbers. She needed to seize the initiative, needed to make them react to her instead of her reacting to them. The best defense was aggressive offense. Camila moved through the hospital with purpose, no longer holding fixed positions but actively hunting. She knew where the insurgents would have to go: the patient wards, the operating theater, the intake area where wounded were gathered. She positioned herself to intercept them before they reached those locations. In the intensive care ward, she found 4 insurgents preparing to kill ICU patients who were too critically injured to move. Camila came through the door fast and low, catching them off guard. The HK-417 barked 4 times. 4 controlled shots, 4 targets down before they could turn their weapons toward her. An insurgent appeared from behind a curtain, his AK-47 swinging toward her. Camila's rifle was momentarily aimed the wrong direction, and he had a split-second advantage that should have been fatal. Instead, she dropped the rifle and drew her combat knife in one smooth motion, closing the distance before he could fire and driving the blade up under his ribs with the precision from years of close combat training. He dropped and Camila recovered her rifle, checked the magazine, 15 rounds remaining, and kept moving. The surgical wing had 6 insurgents moving methodically through it, checking each room for victims. Camila intercepted them at a corridor Georgian where the hallway narrowed, creating a deadly bottleneck that limited their ability to use their numerical advantage. She opened fire from a position that gave her protection while they were exposed, and the confined space became a killing ground. She dropped 3 of them in the first 5 seconds. The remaining 3 tried retreating, but Camila pursued aggressively, not giving them time to set up a defensive position. Close combat was about momentum and aggressive action. Whoever kept the initiative usually survived, and whoever lost it usually died. She caught them trying to establish a defensive position at the nurse's station, and eliminated all 3 before they could create effective shooting lane. The HK-417's magazine ran empty, and Camila performed a tactical reload while moving to cover, her hands executing the magazine change with automatic precision. Behind her she could hear more insurgents responding to the firefight, converging on her position. She just made herself the center of attention, which tactically was exactly what she'd wanted. Better they focus on her than hunt for patients and staff. But it was also extremely dangerous. Camila moved quickly, using her knowledge of the hospital's design to stay ahead of the converging forces. She led them away from the operating theater where most of the patients and staff were sheltering, drawing them toward the hospital's south section where there were fewer civilians to protect. In the pharmacy, she found medical supplies that could be weaponized, oxygen tanks that could become improvised explosives if punctured correctly, alcohol and cleaning liquids that were highly flammable, syringes and medical tools that could be used as weapons if needed. Camila positioned one of the large oxygen cylinders in a doorway, ran a tripwire made from IV tubing across the entrance at ankle height, then fired a single shot into the cylinder from a safe distance. The tank ruptured with explosive force, sending fragments through the doorway just as insurgents tried to enter. 30 seconds later, the tripwire caused one of them to stumble into the cloud of escaping oxygen just as Camila fired an incendiary round she'd found in the security office. The oxygen ignited with a flash fire that filled the doorway with flames hot enough to be immediately deadly. The insurgents were learning that the hospital had become a death trap, but they were committed now. They'd lost too many fighters to retreat without completing their objective, and their commander was clearly pushing them forward despite the losses. Camila heard them trying to flank her position, moving through the hospital's ventilation spaces and ceiling area. She grabbed her last grenade, climbed onto a medical supply shelf and tossed it up into the ceiling space where she could hear movement. The explosion brought down ceiling tiles and 2 bodies that had been trying to maneuver above her. She was down to her last magazine, 20 rounds in the HK-417 against an enemy force that still numbered at least 20 fighters. Those weren't favorable odds. But Camila wasn't fighting to win in traditional terms. She was fighting to buy time for the patients and staff to survive, and every minute she kept the insurgents occupied was another minute for potential backup forces to arrive. A soldier appeared at her side, Corporal Devan Mitchell, one of the security detail who'd survived the initial assault. His face was streaked with blood and his uniform was torn, but he was still fighting. "Sergeant, I've got maybe 40 rounds left and I have no clue what's happening, but I'm with you." "Good," Camila said, checking her ammunition. "We're going to the supply depot. There are more weapons there, and we can set up a defensive position that controls access to the operating room." "You're a medic," Mitchell said, following her as they moved through the hospital. "How do you know how to do all this?" "Long story," Camila replied, pausing at a corner to cover their movement. "Short version, I used to do this type of work before I became a medic. Now move." They reached the supply depot, a reinforced structure within the hospital compound where medical supplies and equipment were stored. It also happened to be where the base kept its backup ammunition and a few additional weapons for emergency situations. Camila found what she needed: 2 M4 carbines, 6 magazines of ammunition, and by incredibly good luck, an M2049 squad automatic weapon with 200 rounds of linked ammunition. The SA-2A was a light machine gun that could deliver covering fire with devastating effectiveness. She handed one M4 to Mitchell. "You know how to use this?" "I'm Army infantry," he replied, checking the weapon. "I was born knowing how to use this." "Good. Set up on that corner. Eliminate anything that tries to come through the east hallway. I'll handle the west." Camila positioned herself with the M2049, establishing a defensive position that gave her overlapping shooting lanes covering both approaches to the supply depot and the operating theater beyond. The SA-2A's support legs deployed. She ran the belt of ammunition through the loading system, charged the weapon and waited. The insurgents came in a coordinated assault. They'd clearly decided that overwhelming force was their best option against whoever was providing this unexpected resistance. 10 fighters pushed through the east corridor while another 15 came from the west, all of them moving with tactical discipline and covering fire. Mitchell opened fire with his M4 controlled burst that dropped the first 2 insurgents through the east corridor. "Contact E." "I see them," Camila replied, opening fire with the M2049. The light machine gun roared, sending controlled bursts downrange at 800 rounds per minute. The bullets tore through the insurgents advancing from the west with devastating effect. The narrow corridor became a killing ground. The insurgents tried to retreat, but Camila kept firing, not giving them space to establish cover or return accurate fire. The M2049 consumed its ammunition belt with mechanical efficiency, and insurgent after insurgent dropped. When the weapon ran dry, Camila had burned through all 200 rounds in maybe 20 seconds of sustained fire. The west corridor was filled with bodies and the sharp smell of gunpowder. She'd just eliminated or wounded at least a dozen fighters in less than half a minute. Mitchell was still engaging to the east, his M4 firing regularly as he picked off insurgents trying to flank their position. "I'm down to my last magazine. Fall back to the operating room," Camila ordered, grabbing the HK-417 and her remaining ammunition. "I'll cover you." She laid down covering fire while Mitchell retreated, then followed him moving through the hospital toward the operating theater, where Captain Webb had barricaded the survivors. Behind them she could hear the remaining insurgents regrouping, but their radio chatter had changed. There was uncertainty now, even fear. They'd started this assault expecting easy victims and instead had walked into a nightmare. Camila reached the operating room doors and gave the signal. 3 shots. Pause. 2 The barricade shifted, and Webb's face appeared, showing shock at the blood-covered medic holding a battle rifle. "Ross." "Later, sir." Camila interrupted, checking her ammunition. "Down to 15 rounds in the HK-417, 1 partial magazine for the M4. "How many patients and staff inside?" 38 patients. 14 staff. Webb replied. "Are we going to survive this?" "Yes, sir," Camila said with certainty she didn't entirely feel. "But I need you to stay inside. I'm going to finish this." She didn't wait for his response. Camila moved back into the hospital's corridors, hunting the remaining insurgents with the focused aggression that came from understanding that the best way to protect defensive positions was to take the fight to the enemy. She found 3 insurgents trying to plant explosives at the hospital's support columns. They were planning to bring down the entire structure. Camila eliminated all 3 before they could complete the task, then carefully disarmed the explosives they'd already placed. In the recovery ward, 2 insurgents were executing wounded patients who couldn't escape. Camila came through the door and put them both down with controlled shots that ended their massacre before it could continue. Throughout the hospital, she hunted the remaining attackers with systematic efficiency. Some she eliminated in direct combat. Others she trapped using her knowledge of the building's design. A few she simply outmaneuvered, getting behind them before they realized she was there. The last 5 insurgents had barricaded themselves in the hospital's north section, clearly trying to establish a defensive position. Camila could hear them on their radios calling for extraction, realizing their assault had failed catastrophically. She approached carefully, using cover and concealment, watching for ambushes. When she reached their position, she found them trying to escape through a window. She eliminated 3 before they could exit. The last 2 surrendered, throwing down their weapons and raising their hand. Camila restrained them with medical tubing, secured them to a bed frame, and left them for the security forces that would eventually process prisoners. Then she moved through the hospital one more time, clearing each room methodically to ensure no insurgents remained. The facility was silent now, except for the groaning of wounded insurgents and the sound of distant helicopters approaching, likely the quick reaction force that someone had managed to call before communications went down. Camila stood in the hospital's central corridor, surrounded by the aftermath of the battle she'd just fought. Maws of insurgents covered the floors, bullet holes riddled the walls, medical equipment lay destroyed. But in the operating theater, 38 patients and 14 staff members were alive because she'd stopped the assault. Captain Webb emerged from the operating room, his face showing the shock of someone trying to process what had just happened. Sergeant Ross, what just happened here? I protected our patients, sir. Camila replied, her voice professionally neutral despite the adrenaline still flowing through her system. That's what medics do. Medics save lives, Webb said slowly. I counted at least 40 insurgents. You eliminated most of them by yourself. I had help, Camila gestured to Corporal Mitchell, who sat against a wall looking like he'd just survived the apocalypse. But yes, sir, I stopped them. How? You're a medic. You're supposed to be, sir. Before I was a medic, I was something else. Camila interrupted gently. That something else is classified above your security clearance. But when this hospital came under attack, that training saved your life and the lives of everyone in this facility. The quick reaction force arrived 10 minutes later, 30 heavily armed soldiers who looked ready for a major battle, and instead found a hospital full of bodies and one medic in a blue jacket standing in the middle of the devastation. The QRF commander, Major Sarah Chen, stared at the scene with the expression of someone trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what should be possible. Sergeant Ross, you're the medic stationed here. Yes, ma'am, Camila replied, setting down the HK-417, and you did this. Chen gestured at the bodies throughout the hospital. The situation required immediate action, ma'am. I took it. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then keyed her radio. Command, this is QRF Actual. Situation at FOB Razor Medical is complex. Hospital is secure. Approximately 45 to 50 enemy casualties. Friendly casualties minimal thanks to actions of combat medic Sergeant Camila Ross. Request immediate investigation and possibly a medal for the most capable medic I've ever encountered. The investigation took 3 weeks and involved officers whose security clearances were so high their name tags were probably classified. Camila explained her background, the special operations training, the classified missions, the decision to transfer to medical services after her injury. Sergeant Ross, a 2-star general, finally said, your previous service is impressive. Your current service is exemplary. What you did at FOB Razor was extraordinary. You saved 38 patients and 14 staff members by single-handedly defeating an insurgent force that outnumbered you approximately 45 to 1. I had assistance from Corporal Mitchell, sir. Camila corrected. Noted. But the tactical analysis suggests you personally eliminated approximately 42 enemy combatants in close combat while wearing a medic's uniform and using captured weapons. The situation required it, sir. The situation required someone with your unique combination of medical training and special operations experience. The general agreed. Which raises an interesting question. Should we keep limiting your talents by confining you to one role? 6 months later, Sergeant First Class Camila Ross stood in a briefing room at Fort Bragg, addressing a classroom full of special operations medics. She wore a uniform that combined medical insignia with special operations tabs. The Army had created a new role specifically for her and others like her. Combat medicine isn't just about saving lives, she told the class. It's about understanding that sometimes the best way to save your patients is to eliminate the threat trying to kill them. You will be trained as medics first, but you will also be trained to fight. Because in modern warfare, the enemy doesn't respect the Red Cross. They target medical facilities specifically because they know that's where we concentrate our wounded. She paused, letting that sink in. What happened at FOB Razor shouldn't have been necessary. The Geneva Conventions are supposed to protect medical facilities, but the enemy doesn't care about international law. So we have to be prepared to defend our patients with the same skills we use to heal them. One of the students raised his hand. Sergeant, the report said you were just a medic when the attack happened. How did you know what to do? I wasn't just anything, Camila replied. I was a medic with additional training that became relevant when the situation demanded it. The lesson isn't that every medic needs to be an elite operator. The lesson is that you can't predict what skills you'll need in combat. So you train in everything, you stay proficient, and when the moment comes, you do what's necessary to protect the people depending on you. The story of what happened at FOB Razor spread through military circles despite efforts to keep it classified. It became a legend, the medic in the blue jacket who'd eliminated an entire assault force while protecting her patient. Some details were exaggerated in the retelling, but the core truth remained. When 45 insurgents attacked a field hospital expecting to massacre everyone inside, they encountered Camila Ross, and that had been their last mistake. The insurgents assumed she was a medic, someone trained to heal, not harm, someone who would panic when attacked, not fight back, someone who represented an easy target rather than a deadly threat. They learned otherwise in the 90 seconds it took Camila to clear the first 4 rooms. They learned it again in the 15 minutes it took her to hunt them through the hospital they'd intended to destroy. And the survivors learned it when they were captured and realized that the person in the blue medic's jacket was the reason none of them had completed their mission. Camila Ross proved that day that medical training and combat skills weren't opposites. They were complementary, that the person saving lives could also take them when necessary. That the blue jacket didn't make her weak, it made her deceptive. They assumed she was a medic. But they assumed that's all she was. That assumption killed 42 of them, and saved the lives of everyone she'd sworn to protect. Some warriors heal, some warriors fight. Camila Ross did both, and the enemy force that attacked FOB Razor learned too late that the most dangerous person in a hospital might be the one wearing blue scrubs and carrying a medical bag. She was a medic. She was also a warrior, and when forced to choose between those identities, she'd proven she could be both simultaneously. Healing with one hand, fighting with the other, saving lives by taking them. That was Camila Ross. That was who she'd always been, even when people assumed otherwise. And that was the lesson learned in Blood and Smoke at FOB Razor. Never assume you know someone's full capabilities based on what uniform they're wearing. The medic might also be the most dangerous person in the room, and you won't know it until it's far too late to matter. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of brave women in uniform.